Hello, welcome to another video of the series for Pro and Plus subscribers. Today I'm super excited. I'm here with Kahn Jekarl. This is going to be a very special video because we're not going to focus on the tech side or on the art side of Unity. We're going to focus on one super important, probably the most important part of making games, which is how to make money, how to sell the games. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to ask you first, what did you do at Unity?
Okay, so I started Unity in 2017, and I'm a global program manager working on the paid subscription business.
Awesome, awesome. And before you joining Unity, where were you working at?
Yeah, so I've been in games for about 20 years now.
Awesome.
So I started off as a game programmer, doing C and C++ for PlayStation, Xbox games. Did that for about 6 years. Then I moved more into like the marketing and business side. So I was a brand manager at Activision working on Call of Duty. Then went to Zynga and worked on Mafia Wars, Bingo, and some of their other casino titles at Zynga. But then after that, I started a game company, mobile game company called Flow State Media. So for 5 years, I was running Flow State, releasing games, maybe like a half dozen games on Apple and iOS and Android. And then did all the fundraising there, and a lot of the lessons learned were from that experience, running Flow State.
Awesome, pretty impressive. How was that transition from being a programmer to now being a person focusing on development of the business?
Right. Yeah, it took a little bit of time, to be honest with you. It wasn't totally natural. There's a lot of like change in vocabulary and what people say when you move from the programming and technical world to more of like the marketing and business world. But over time, I was able to make the change. And I think it was just sort of vital in order for my company to survive. You sort of have to learn these things of how to pitch and how to get presentations together so that investors or publishers are comfortable working with you.
And probably you're going to talk about this later, but now, and especially small teams, they have to be like this, right? Like they have to be the hardcore programmer or the hardcore artist, but also they need to go out and sell stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think everyone knows whatever platform you choose, it's extremely competitive to get your game noticed and get it featured and for people to really like pay attention. So there needs to be at least one person on the team, if not more, that are really thinking about more the business and marketing side of the game, because you could have the greatest game, but if it doesn't stand out from everything else in the different stores, then no one's going to talk about it, and it's going to be hard to be successful.
That's the thing, right? Like it's not enough to just have a super fun game, a super good looking game. So
right, exactly.
Okay, super excited. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So let's start.
Yeah. So basically, I'm going to walk you through this presentation is about pitching and fundraising. And there's a variety of topics that I just want to go over, and we'll spend a few minutes on each of these. Nice. Talking about your project, the truth about investors and publishers, the pitch deck itself, how to get meetings, not many people talk about that, the actual pitch when you're with investors and publishers, the concept of pursuing multiple opportunities, so you're not just tied to one person for a particular contract or anything like that. The term sheet, and finally prepping for launch of your title. Awesome. So I'll just launch into it.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah.
So the first thing is tough talk. Talking about your actual project, and the brutal truth of it is that if you just have an idea and you have a couple slides together, no one's going to fund that project. It's just everyone has a really great idea for a particular game concept or anything like that. But what separates people is what work have they actually done towards it. If you're an investor or you're a publisher and you see someone with just an idea and a couple slides, or you see someone with a game that's ready to be published and it's fun, it's playable, it already has metrics to talk about, who are you going to back and partner with? You're gonna partner with the more mature project. So that's one to think about. And the second bullet is the more work that you've done, the easier things will be. The further you are on actually, publishing the title and having it ready to go to the app stores or putting it on Steam or whatever, the more investors, publishers are going to like it, because they're really curious about your ability to execute. So that sort of helps answer that question. One recommendation at this point is, if you're the great artist, or you need someone on your team with super strong art direction skills. I think we all know iconic games out there, and they all have very, very strong art direction. So, if you're that solo programmer without a lot of artistic skills, you need to find a partner. Even with, retro 8-bit style pixel art, even those games, they have a strong art style, the ones that really, rise to the top. So in order to market your game, and, the saying is a picture speaks 1,000 words, it's absolutely true. People need to be wowed instantly from your screenshots or your title screen, whatever they see, right away that shows, hey, this is a quality product. So that's one recommendation. The other thing is, you really have to keep it simple. Even if you have some sort of abstract concept for the idea and it's really challenging, what's sort of popular and current for games nowadays, you have to be able to explain it at least very, very simply, so that, publishers, investors, and eventually people out there reading descriptions in the app stores, they know what it is right away. So some just random examples, it's, oh, this is a zombie dragon RTS. People know that means, okay, this is zombies, this is dragons, this is a real-time strategy game. Like, people instantly know what that is. Yeah. Or another one is steampunk Super Mario Kart. You already get that it's an art style, that ties to steampunk, but the gameplay is a lot like Super Mario Kart. So it's arcadey, it's fun, it's multiplayer. If you need to take, 10 minutes to explain what your game is about, that's a big problem. You need to be able to whittle it down and explain concisely what it is right away before investors or publishers really talk with you.
Okay.
So that's the first point. Moving on to the truth about investors and publishers. So, I think one thing people think about investors, venture capitalists, is that they love this super risky, crazy, out-of-the-box idea. But having talked with probably over 200 investors and publishers during my time at Flow State, is they actually hate risk. They don't want any risk at all. They'd rather really send out their feelers and find an amazing concept and opportunity that's pretty much ready to go and ready to go to market before anyone else does. They want to be the first one to be like, okay, I want to be a part of this. Let's go out and launch this. But they want to see something that has big market potential. The game or project is pretty much already complete and there's no execution risk anymore. And that it's sort of a slam dunk. That's what they would like to do. So keep that in mind when you're approaching them. They don't want to deal with a lot of risk. Otherwise, they'll just say no and pass on the opportunity.
So in this case, it will be better maybe to wait until you have something that at least you believe will already mitigate some risks, right? Like,
exactly.
Probably you made you ask people if this topic is interesting, or you have some background data that supports those things. Okay.
Right, absolutely. I mean, really, the rule of thumb, I advise is go as far as you can without raising any money or getting some sort of publishing deal. Yeah. If you can totally self-fund and self-publish and get the word out all by yourself, that's great, because if you think about it, investors, when they put money into your company, they're taking some ownership, and that means some control. And so that means you're giving up control. So if you can avoid that, that's good, because if it's a huge blockbuster success, 100% of that goes back to you. Otherwise, you have to split it. Same with a publisher. They're going to have some sort of revenue split once the game starts, making money. Yeah. That could be 30% going to them, 50%, 70%. Or if you do it all by yourself, that's 100% to you. So keep that in mind.
And let me ask you another question. Mm-hmm. What is more common, that an investor invests in a game in particular, or in a company, or it's like
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's sort of better for the game developer to work with a publisher on a publishing deal because then you're not giving equity within the company.
Yeah.
You still own 100% of the company, and the agreement is just on a particular product. The issue, though, is that there's a lot more investors out there than there are actual game publishers who can help you with marketing and understand like the dynamics of the game industry and help like maybe test your game. Because when you include the number of angel investors out there, all the way to like venture capitalists, there's much more out there. So if you can work a game publisher and they really love your game and you don't have to give up ownership of the company, I think that's the way to go.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I think that's about it, on this slide. That's just the truth that they, investors, publishers, they don't want to deal with risk. So let's go on to the pitch deck. So the first bullet point is pretty important. So, people don't really realize that you should have just two decks. One is for email that you would send out to someone that would have a lot more information so that people can read this like on their phone or at their computer. And then you should have your own deck that's for live pitches, where it has a lot of the words taken out. It's more about imagery, charts, things like that. So the focus of the presentation is about you. Because really in a live presentation, a lot of it is like you establishing credibility and rapport with the investor or publisher. So that's what I advise, having one deck for email that's a lot more detailed and one deck that's more for live pitches. That's light on detail, so the attention is on you when you're pitching. And so, here's some of the details. And, there's a lot of YouTube videos that you can Google, what are the top 10 things you need in a deck, but I'd like to summarize my important ones here. First off, what's the project? Again, you should have strong visuals right from the get-go. The very first slide that people should walk into is something gorgeous. Okay. It shows the title of your game, your key art, what's the hero character or heroine, what's the game about? Like, sell them right from the get-go.
So it's not like commonly people might think like, oh, I'm meeting with this investor. They just care about the money. They don't care about anything visual. But in reality, I think most people will fall for something that looks amazing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. I think, like I said, a picture speaks 1,000 words. And particularly for game publishers, they're going to be more sophisticated about the game industry. So they want to see something original, beautiful, striking, like right from the get-go. So if you have really strong art direction, let that show right from the beginning of the meeting. Yeah. They'll also want to know what's the market opportunity. So for a similar genre of game, have you found data? How many types of users play this type of game? What type of annual revenue have those types of games brought in? And there's a lot of data out there that talks about what match 3 types of type of games have done historically and things like that, or social casino types of games, first-person shooters, how much they make year to year. Is it growing? Is it fading? All that data is out there, so it's important to encapsulate that and show to investors and publishers that there's a big opportunity here. It's growing for XYZ reason. And if you can show, some sort of very deep insight about the market that maybe not everyone else is thinking, that shows the investors like, hey, this person's onto something. Maybe this thing can blow up even more than it is right today. So that's important. What's the market opportunity? Also, you need to talk about the team. Who's on the team? What's their backgrounds? Have they gone to gaming schools, good schools? What are the companies that they worked for previously? Is it all AAA talent? Have they worked on huge games? Our team, we worked on Call of Duty and a bunch of Zynga titles, and doing free-to-play was great to have a lot of Zynga, titles and team members there because it establishes credibility right away. Oh, these guys have done free-to-play already. So that's key. And what's important specifically for games, what's the twist? If you're just going to do another Candy Crush Saga game, that's boring. Nobody wants to do that, and they know people won't really jump towards it. But if you have some sort of twist, like, this is a bad example, but like Candy Crush Saga, but with zombies or something like that, you know, there has to be something new, and that's the big challenge of gaming, right? It's got to be sort of understandable, but there's got to be some creative twist in there that really makes it sort of resonate with people. And then if your game is launched, or if there's any types of metrics in terms of, you know, maybe you've done early access on Steam for your PC game and you have like a big community that's already growing, talk about the size of the community. If you've launched your mobile game, have the retention metrics ready, the monetization, you know, what's your average revenue per user. If your game is launched, you have to have the metrics ready and you have to show that to the investor, you know, pretty quickly or somewhere along the presentation, because they're going to ask for that anyway. Have you done homework on the competition? What's the biggest players in the space? Who are new entrants that are like maybe a threat to the business? Because they want to know that you've done homework and you know that, hey, this is a challenging opportunity. People are going to be coming at us with this type of game or that type of game. You need to be able to show like you've done your homework and understand why this project can do better than the competition. And finally, something that people forget to ask is, you know, how much money they require. You know, don't forget at the end of the presentation or the meeting, you know, you want XYZ $1 million and you want to specify exactly what it's for. You know, you want to say, you know, 10% is going to go for like, you know, general administration, boring things, you know, within the company, paying for taxes, things like that. But then, you know, 40% or 50% is going to go to developing the rest of the game for the next, you know, 6 months. And the remaining percentage, I'd like to go all towards marketing the game once it's live. You know, so that's a somewhat realistic split that, you know, investors might imagine. And it's very high level. I just said 3 categories, you know, like marketing, development, and just general expenses. Okay. So you need to have that in there because that's what they're going to ask. It's like, does this person want $250,000 or they want $25 million? You know, that's obviously a big difference that the investor needs to know. So yeah, so that's it for the pitch deck. So the next thing I want to go over, and this is extremely tactical, so I apologize, this is not a super high level thing, but this is where sort of the rubber meets the road of actually getting to talk with people who are going to make the decision on funding your game or not. And why you really want to be able to sit down with the people. I know everyone interacts over email and digitally over LinkedIn and things like that, and there's a lot of texting, but it's important to be able to sit down with this person or the group because it could be the beginning of a very long-term relationship with them, you know, as like a publisher and a potential partner. So it's really important to have in-person meetings when you can. Yeah. My advice is you really have to work your network as much as possible. So everyone, you've had a good relationship at work, you know, at school, college, high school, whatever makes sense, link in with them, you know, because once you start linking in with more people, then your overall network expands like crazy. Because you never know who's suddenly, oh, this buddy of mine now, he works at Xbox. Yeah. And Xbox is launching a program for indies, and he's connected to a person that's the head of that program. Oh, you know, hey, Richard, hey, I haven't talked to you for a little bit, but I'm really excited about like talking to Xbox. I saw your LinkedIn connected with this guy. Can you make a warm introduction for us? That is 1,000,000 times better than you just sending a random LinkedIn request to that person. So it really is worth your while to just link in with everyone you know if you're approaching the fundraising, you know, part of your project, because you really need those warm connections to actually have people listen to you.
And it's even more difficult for them to ignore a request from someone they know.
Exactly.
Right? So
exactly. Yeah. And you all automatically get this hint of credibility, if not more, just because of that interaction, you know, so I think that's really important. Now, let's say, you know, an important part, you know, as well is when you're talking with the company and you're approaching them, or even when you're meeting with them, that you research what they're doing thoroughly. Because let's say this is some sort of investor and they only do, you know, hardcore first-person shooters, it's sort of a waste of time to approach them with a free-to-play, match 3 type of game.
Yeah.
You need to do the homework, and you never want to be caught in a meeting with a company that has focused on, first-person shooters, and you can't talk intelligently about the games they worked in. Because you think about it, that's their blood, sweat, and tears have gone into those games, and you haven't even, been polite enough to research the games that they worked on, or maybe there's big news articles that they release, hey, we're going to look into getting into casual or mobile, or we're going to get into esports. The more you appreciate what they're doing, the more they can see you as a partner. So it's important to research them before you start emailing them, and definitely before you sit down with them, because it shows a level of respect for what's going on with their company. So that's really important. This other point is pretty important in terms of creating tiers of publishers and investors. And what I mean by this is, the truth is obviously there's different tiers of developers out there. There's the AAA, the Blizzards and Treyarchs, and those companies that are making Call of Duty and huge, massive games. The Us Two guys who did Monument Valley. I mean, those are cream of the crop developers. But then there's the developers that maybe aren't the AAA, but they're still very good. And there's different tiers that go down.
I see.
Same with publishers and investors. And my recommendation is, it's good to have iterations in your pitch, in your process, and how you talk with them, how you talk about the game, what you want to show. And it's better to have your first early meetings and pitches with people that maybe are a little bit closer to you. Maybe you have a buddy who works at Ubisoft in their business development group. Pitch to him first. Get that really honest feedback from people who care about you, who know you, and you can evolve from that point. You don't want your very first meeting to be like the CEO of Blizzard, right? And then you just bomb that meeting, and then you have no chance of getting a deal with Blizzard because you just did terribly.
Yeah.
And be prepared. You might have some terrible meetings, and that's just part of the experience. So you want to sort of tier the people that you're talking to. First, those people who are close to you, get your pitch down, get that really honest, candid feedback, tighten up your presentation, make it better and better. And then, of course, being at conferences. I mean, I think most people know Game Developers Conference, E3. There's obviously big ones in Europe. Maybe Gamescom would be a good one, where a lot of business meetings are held. So be ready to make travel plans to be at these meetings. When you're trying to talk with those initial investors, saying, "Hey, I'm going to be at E3," email them a couple months ahead of time if you can. I'd love to sit down with you and show you our game for 30 minutes. Or a Game Developers Conference. Let them know ahead of time, I'm going to be there. I want to meet you in person. This is the type of commitment I'm going to make because I believe in my project.
Okay.
And when they know you're going to be there, it's like that extra level. Okay, they're really committed towards this.
Because you could potentially do these things remotely, right? Scheduling a phone call or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, I do believe attending these events, budgeting for these things also speaks about the developer, right? About the commitment. It might be difficult for some people, small studios.
Yes, of course.
But yeah, I do believe meeting face to face, having an on-site makes a big difference.
Yeah, and of course, certainly for my startup, we didn't raise a ton of money. There's definitely some events I just couldn't go to. But fortunately, I was in California, so E3 and Game Developers Conference was very close. But what are the key conferences in your region, your country, your continent, whatever makes sense? You wanna try to go there because there's just so many of the business folks are going to be there that are the decision makers. It's worth putting in the effort to try to be at those events.
And it's also an investment, right?
Exactly.
It's not you're going on vacation. It's
exactly.
It's part of the business for.
Yeah. I mean, I was doing a Guitar Hero VR game, and I brought my Oculus Rift and my plastic guitar controller and my gaming PC. I took it all over Asia, all up and down Korea to meet with people and have it ready to go. So.
And you could have gone with just a video or something, but it's different.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly,
Right? Like,
exactly.
The perception is
Exactly,
different.
exactly, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so basically go to them when you can. If they say like, oh, I'm traveling from the East Coast and I'll be in LA for a week and we're here in San Francisco or something like that, if there's a big possibility you can go to that meeting and maybe book some others while you're there. Just say, hey, I'll meet you there in LA. That's how much I want to meet you. You're on the West Coast for a little bit of time. Give me an hour of your time. And like I said, it's not easy, and sometimes it's too expensive to travel. And there's times when phone meetings and Skype meetings can work. But if there's a chance, it's really helpful.
Awesome.
And I think the last point is important. Be persistent but polite at all times. You don't want to ever express frustration if someone doesn't respond to your first couple emails. But you also don't want to give up after one email. People get busy. I mean, you just think of your own inbox. There's probably some emails you skipped just because you were traveling or things came up, so it doesn't mean you don't like the idea.
Yeah.
It could just mean I had a bazillion emails that day and I couldn't get to it. So, you have to sort of play it by ear once a week or something like that, or maybe a little bit more if a conference is upcoming, but be persistent but always polite, to try to get a response from people. So let's say you've got the meetings, and this is a little bit more tactical about the actual pitch itself. So you're sitting down, you're in the room, and you're getting ready. What I like to do is really understand what the scene is going to be. If you're going to meet at some hotel bar or some lobby at Game Developers Conference or E3, get set up with the Wi-Fi. Do you need Wi-Fi connection? Do you need to bring your own sort of internet hub or device to give yourself good internet? Figure that out well before the meeting. The last thing you want to do is you only have 20 minutes with an investor and you spend 10 minutes of it trying to get the Wi-Fi working. That's something you can solve ahead of time, and you should, because it just shows you're prepared, you're very professional. So just a little thing to call out. And then I highly recommend rehearsing your pitch. Either recording yourself and watching yourself, which some people may cringe. I definitely cringe when I had to do it, in terms of what I would say and how I would say things. But when you do that, you learn about how you talk, how you communicate, and you can get better and better. And also pitching maybe to your teammates, to friends and family, things like that. Maybe people who are, other people in the game industry. The more you rehearse, the better off it's going to be. So I highly recommend, practicing the pitch. And specifically for games, what's the demo going to be like? What level are you going to show? How difficult do you want it to be? What are you going to say while the person's trying to figure out the controls and getting into the game? Make sure that experience is totally manicured and thought out, especially for the demo. Yeah. So it's they're getting to the fun. They're not bogged down with 70 text boxes or anything like that. Just get into the fun. And if it's a custom build just for the meeting or for any meetings you have, do it. Even if it might not be the final game in this form, who cares? If you can explain some things really quickly as opposed to text box for tutorial, just do it. Yeah. Because the key is, can they get into the game? Can they see the fun quickly? Because if they never get to it, you're sort of dead on arrival, right? They're just never going to support it. And absolutely no crashes. That shows on your team if the game crashes or not. Yeah. So that's not acceptable for your game to crash when somebody's demoing it. You need to QA it. I did a lot of QA, even though I was founder of the company. I was doing tons of QA because I needed to make sure it was all good. Yeah. And you want to display confidence in your project, belief that this is going to be a successful game. But also be open-minded. If you're going to be working with this person as a partner, you need to be open to some feedback. And you never know, they could have some really insightful feedback based on maybe a lot of games that they've been looking at that could really improve your game. So you need to be open to that. And again, be very clear on what you're asking for. I'm looking for $5 million 50% will go to development, 50% will go to the marketing. Let me know what the next steps would be. And my last point is following up. When do you think will you come to a decision? Can I email you next Monday to sort of like talk about sort of next steps? And really, really, really follow through. You need to continue the conversation and push towards a conclusion, whether they want you to make changes with the game, whether they need more information, or maybe they just want to like move on, towards like signing a deal with you, which would be great. Here's another sort of tidbit of information is pursuing multiple opportunities. Now, let's say you have, 3 or 4 interested developers after that, or publishers after that first meeting. Keep all those doors open. Even though one guy is like, the nicest one and he seems the most excited, that doesn't mean you should close the other doors, because those doors could be still open. And you never know. I was surprised as a developer. Some people who are really sort of reserved, didn't show a lot of excitement when we met, they actually would come in and invest in the company. You just don't really know. So until you get that yes, until you get that no, keep the multiple options open if you have the benefit of having multiple publishers talking with you. The other thing is let's say it goes to like negotiating terms of how the money would work out and what the revenue split would be. If you have one offer and it's like company A saying like, hey, we'll give you $5 million, to fund this project, you can go and tell that other publisher, well, your offer of 4, I could get 5 from this other company, so I think I should probably go there, right? Yeah. And they're like, whoa, no, we like this deal. We'll do 5.5, and maybe we'll tweak the revenue share a little bit more in your favor. Yeah. So if it's just the whole game of having more than one option. If you have more than one option, your negotiating your ground, it just improves, right? So, it's always good to have more suitors interested in what you're doing. Yeah, so I think that's about all I have on the multiple opportunities. And then last slide is coming to terms. Is it's a little bit more the paperwork side of like the business, but you have to come to some sort of legal agreement with a publisher investor, and so that's what the term sheet is. Every single thing that's in the term sheet, you can Google and understand what it is, what the revenue share is, what are typical revenue shares. Right of first refusal in terms of like, what you would do in the future. These are all things you can look up, but it's important that you understand it. Maybe at this point you have some sort of, attorney tied to your company, or maybe there's someone that's a friend of a family or some sort of acquaintance you can talk to get their sort of take. And don't be afraid to ask, like, what does this mean? And, this seems a little bit restrictive. When I talked with my attorney, we were seeing if we can relax this restriction. One thing is like, what happens to the IP, the intellectual property of the game? Do you as a developer get to keep it forever? Or when you sign this agreement, are you actually handing it over to the publisher? So then for the sequel, if there is a sequel, maybe they can actually have another developer develop your idea. And so that would be terrible for you. So there's these things you need to like understand. And maybe it's good to like, ask an attorney to get their advice. So once it gets to that point, really do the homework, make sure you're not giving away the whole farm, even though you're excited about moving on and getting the funding. The other thing is like, understanding what the scenarios are. If we agree we're going to launch a game by the end of 2019 and they say, we're going to penalize you if you don't launch the game by 2019. You need to make sure exactly what that penalty is and it's in the contract and you understand the repercussions. Does it change the revenue share? Do they pull out of the marketing at that point in time? These are very important things to understand. And the other things that I see, that could be issues are that what if the game makes no money at all? Do you owe them something? Are you in trouble with them? Is there some sort of legal repercussion? you need to protect on the downside of the scenario. What if the game is a total flop? What happens at that point in time? But also, you know, what if this is a huge hit? What if you're sitting on the next Candy Crush Saga and the game makes $1 billion in revenue? What happens in those scenarios? And you need to sort of map it out. Like, typically, as a game makes more and more money, the revenue share goes more and more to the developer. Because initially the publisher was taking all the risk, putting, you know, the $5–10 million out there. And so you need to make sure that at a certain point, if it becomes more and more successful, you know, more of the revenue share is coming to you, probably ideally maybe 90, 95, 100% to you at a certain point in time. So these are all things to look out for. What happens if it's a failure? What happens if it's a big success? And the final slide is just prepping for launch. You know, regardless of platform, you know, marketing assets are absolutely required. And if there's a lot of interest, you know, from the community, we could do a whole nother talk on this one because, I mean, you see it when you go to your Apple App Store or the Google Play Store or on Steam. Everything needs to look beautiful. You know, your trailer, your screenshots, the title image, your logo, your company's logo, everything has to look really tight and put together because it's competitive out there. You're going up against Monument Valley. That's a no joke competitor out there. So you really need to like up your game in terms of the marketing angle. And I know that a lot of developers, and certainly I was in this camp as well, you don't think about that until the very, very tail end, and you're like, oh, I need to like upload these things, you know, onto the App Store. You need to really take your time and make sure your art director or your, you know, someone on your team is making these assets look as amazing as possible. And then I would also say that, you know, having as much video as possible is always great. You know, some sort of trailer is always nice. You'll see a lot of mobile games have videos that you can sort of see, you know, a glimpse of the gameplay. The more videos, I think, the better. That's always good. And then a very strong and clear description. And then my final point is, you know, there's some nice platforms out there, like for Steam on PC, they have this whole early access program where you're not officially releasing the game, but you are releasing a version of the game. And it's known to the community, hey, this isn't the final product, but we're putting it here specifically to get community feedback, to make this game better and better, so when we finally go live, you know, it's as best as it can be. So something to consider for people who are thinking about releasing on PC.
And I think Google Play also supports some sort of beta programs. Not sure about that at the App Store, but yeah. And on that specific note, do you think if developers release on early access or some beta, it's beneficial because they get feedback, they get some numbers and stuff, but is there like a risk of publishers saying, oh, I wanted to have like the you know, the announcement, I wanted these to be like super new that nobody knew about that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think there's more benefit to getting it out there early and getting the feedback, because I know people, you know, especially startups, they're worried about letting other people know what they're working on and what clever idea they're working on. But the truth is, until it gets executed, it's not really a threat to anyone.
Right.
You know, so you could have the most clever game concept and idea, but if you can't actually make that experience, you know, no one's really going to know about that idea, you know? So I lean towards like, hey, if you can get a community really early on in the process, you can be good with them and listen to their feedback and like make them feel like they're almost part of the process. Okay. I mean, then they become sort of advocates for you. Then maybe they start talking about the game on Twitter or social media, and maybe they'll like be the first people to stream the game, and then you have like the seedlings of a real community you're creating. That's very, very powerful, because then it's not just on you to spread the word, but you're letting other people amplify what you're doing. And if you're doing a great job of like incorporating the feedback, making it better while still in early access, then I think you're going to be in a, stronger position.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the last prepared slide that I had, but I wasn't sure if there's any other thoughts or comments or questions.
Yeah, so I guess what we will be interested in is getting to know if people watching us right now would like to go deeper into one of these topics in the future. I think it was amazing.
Thank you.
Sometimes as developers or even as Unity employees, we just try to push the new features. We just try to push adoption of the newest Unity version, and also part of Unity's mission is to make people successful, right? So this is key to make people successful, because if we have all the entire population of the world uses Unity, but no one is making any money, so nobody wins, right? So we want to help people be successful. So if they have more questions, we will be happy to maybe forward them to you or answer them on the chat where we will be posting the video.
Yeah.
So thank you very much again, Kahn.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Getting to understand this part better. And yeah, I hope we can talk again soon.
Cool. Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.